Hi, everybody. My name's Dr. Scott Giacomucci. I'm the director and founder of the Phoenix Center for Experiential Trauma Therapy in Media, Pennsylvania. Wanted to take a moment to talk about post-traumatic growth. So post-traumatic growth is in some ways the opposite of post-traumatic stress. It's the phenomenon of growing after trauma or after adversity. This phenomenon, of course, has been around really forever. You can find examples of it in any spiritual books or historical books or religious books. But the clinical study of it's relatively new. In the research, they're finding that post-traumatic growth is actually more common than post-traumatic stress disorder. 2 out of 3 trauma survivors report some sort of growth after experiencing trauma or adversity, whereas only 1 out of 4 adults that experience trauma will develop post-traumatic stress disorder. So you're almost 2.5 times more likely to experience growth after trauma than you are to develop PTSD. Now, these 2 different experiences can exist concurrently at the same time, so it's not uncommon that one might experience post-traumatic growth and post-traumatic stress at the same time. But I find the idea and just talking about post-traumatic growth to be incredibly hopeful for my clients. Many times as trauma therapists, we can get overly focused on the trauma itself. And there's definitely a place for talking about the trauma and addressing the trauma directly. Many of the clients I've worked with have been in therapy for years, and they've told their trauma stories again and again. And they're wondering, where do I go from here? I've told the story, and it's been helpful to be seen and heard to some degree, but I need some sort of roadmap of now what? And so the concept of post-traumatic growth really gives us a direction and guidance on what it looks like in general to grow after trauma, what it looks like for someone to really tap into post-traumatic growth and healing and transformation after experiencing trauma or after working through post-traumatic stress symptoms. So there's 5 different categories of post-traumatic growth, 5 different ways that it normally manifests within somebody's life. One of the categories is a new sense of personal strength. So after experiencing trauma, I might realize that I'm a lot more resilient than I thought I was. Or I might come to accept that I have a whole lot more courage and determination than I ever could have imagined. And I wouldn't have known that or tapped into it if it wasn't for the trauma I had experienced. So it's quite common that we leave trauma with a new sense of personal strength. The next category is an enhanced sense of importance in relationships. So much of trauma is relational, and it happens at the hands of other human beings. So it's common that we look for good people in our lives, or we come to have additional gratitude or a sense of importance for the healthy relationships that we have. After experiencing trauma, it's only natural that we turn to people close to us for support and to help regulate ourselves, to help validate and to help heal and hear us out and see us in our pain and in our trauma. So after experiencing trauma, the second category, a second way that we grow from it, is an enhanced sense of relationships. The next category is a new sense of appreciation for life. And I think in some ways, because trauma really flips our whole world upside down, it threatens our existence, our survival in this world. It really challenges us existentially in many ways and can help us be more grateful for the good things in life, to further appreciate the little things, to appreciate what we do have, and to appreciate all the goodness in life. Related to that is a fourth category of post-traumatic growth, which is increased connection spiritually or religiously. And again, because trauma happens so often at the hands of other human beings, it would make sense that trauma survivors would turn to the spiritual realm for support, for inspiration, and for guidance. I think God or higher powers or spiritual stories and symbols and rituals and ways of making sense of the world are really helpful in terms of growing from trauma and working through it. And the fifth and final category of post-traumatic growth is a new sense of opportunity in life. Again, I think because trauma turns our lives upside down, it really challenges us to look at the world in new ways. And in doing so, we start to see new opportunities. Perhaps one of the most common ways of seeing new opportunities in life after trauma is being able to help somebody else that's experienced the same thing, or having a deeper sense of sensitivity for someone else's emotions or what someone else may have experienced. There's a way that trauma really forces us to reconsider our sense of identity, and in doing so is likely to increase the number of opportunities that we might see within our life. And so these are the 5 ways that that people grow from trauma, the 5 different categories of post-traumatic growth. And so in your own journey of healing from trauma, or if you're a professional working with clients healing from trauma, I find the ideas of post-traumatic growth and the different domains of post-traumatic growth to be very helpful, providing a framework, a template in some sense, of what it could look like or what we want it to look like in the future working through trauma. My approach to trauma is experiential in that I'm using body-oriented approaches or somatic approaches or experiential action-based approaches such as EMDR therapy or psychodrama therapy. And really, no matter what I'm using, I'm following a clinical map, a 3-stage clinical map that helps me safely and effectively work with trauma. The first phase is working with strengths. So establishing safety, providing education, and working with strengths. Only once those tasks have been completed do I move on to the next phase, which is addressing the trauma directly. And after we've worked with the trauma, the third phase is this phase of post-traumatic growth, focusing on integration, focusing on the future, focusing on transformation and meaning making. One of the pitfalls that I see within the trauma therapy community is that sometimes we have a tendency to go straight for the trauma without doing the strength-based work, which I think is problematic often and can be re-traumatizing for clients and is really unhelpful. Or we might do the strength-based work, go on to address the trauma and do some sort of trauma processing, and then just stop there, forgetting and missing out on all the opportunity of focusing on post-traumatic growth and the importance of helping the client integrate their experience going forward. For professionals, there's also a subfield of research within the post-traumatic growth field. It's called vicarious post-traumatic growth. And I think this is something that we really don't talk about enough. I actually haven't heard anyone else talk about it. I stumbled upon it as I was doing research for my new book, and I hadn't even heard of it until I read about it. By the way, if you're interested in the book, you can find a link to it in the description here. It's published online, open access, so you can access the entire 450-page ebook for free. But the idea of vicarious post-traumatic growth is that professionals vicariously grow because of their work with trauma survivors. So in some ways, it's the opposite of vicarious trauma. And I know from my own experience as a therapist, as an educator, that this is really true. When I look back and reflect on working with trauma survivors, there's ways that the work and my clients and students really have challenged me to grow as not only a professional, but as a human being. Have really helped me to tap into those 5 areas of post-traumatic growth that I described earlier. And so, as professionals, I find it helpful to consider not only burnout and vicarious trauma, but also to consider ways that we experience vicarious post-traumatic growth from our work. In the research on vicarious post-traumatic growth, they found that a wide range of professionals experience it. Everyone from therapists and counselors, social workers and case managers, even lawyers and translators. I believe that vicarious post-traumatic growth manifests for anyone who's working with trauma survivors. So I find these discussions to be very hopeful for clients, for professionals, and help to balance out some of the difficulty and the tragedy of working with trauma. That there's a flip side to the coin. And that flip side is post-traumatic growth. If you wanted to learn more about post-traumatic growth, I'll include some links to further resources in the description below and a handout on my website that I wrote about it that you're welcome to print out and use with your clients or in your training groups. I hope this video has been helpful. If you did find it helpful, I would encourage you to look at some of the other videos on my channel here. My hope is to provide a variety of training videos and educational videos related to trauma therapy and related to psychodrama and experiential group work.